What's up, everybody? This is John with Jumpfair Innovations, bringing you more League of Legends Worlds 2021 content. We had an amazing first day of quarterfinals where we saw Harmo Life take on T1, and T1 had an absolutely dominant performance as they move on to semi-finals. And now we move to day 2 where we have our second lot of regional qualifying matches. This time, of course, between the LPL. We have, of course, RNG, the third seed out of the LPL, but topped their group. And EDG, the first team, the first seed out of the LPL, but the second seed out of Group B. This is really important to note because what we are going to see is that RNG actually gets side priority. They get preference. And this is important in games like this because when you have the teams this close, little advantages like, say, side selection can be enough in order to give the edge to one team or another. Now, of course, RNG are a team that plays very much for their top side. Xiaohu is the superstar of this team, of course, transitioned from mid to top lane, and he has an ocean of a champion pool. He is one of probably the only player, actually, that is confident enough to play these mid lane mages in the top lane, things like Syndra, things like Orianna. So when you're talking about Xiaohu's champion pool, it's very hard to predict what he's going to play because honestly, at times it feels like he just, on the day, he's like, oh, I feel like playing a little bit of Syndra top. Syndra top's probably good into this. I'm going to select Syndra top. So what a lot of people get wrong about RNG, though, is they think that this team is solely dependent on Xiaohu, and that's definitely not the case. Ming, Cryan, and Wei, they do heavily focus top lane to get Xiaohu ahead, but Xiaohu then does leverage a lot of that lead into Gala. Gala farms up, gets the gold that he needs, and then carries late, and it allows Xiaohu and Gala to be two monsters in late game team fighting. So Gala is super important for carry ability when it comes to RNG. EDG are a very classical team. They play very, very front to back, off the back of a strong mid laner in Scout. Scout's one of the best mid laners we have on the planet, and they look to leverage mid into bot lane. So Viper is considered, myself included, consider Viper to be the best ADC on the planet. So obviously you see Flandre being very weak side focused, and we see JJ, Miko really try and make sure that Viper gets what he needs in order to scale and pop off, like we saw he did against FPX in the grand final. Now, RNG, we have to talk about Xiaohu. Xiaohu is so important to this team. As I said, very, very hard to pinpoint a champion pool for him because honestly, it depends on what he feels he can play into the enemy top laner. And this is why I think this is something of a trap that people fall into when they go against RNG, is they try and ban out Xiaohu. And trying to ban out Xiaohu is impossible. It's kind of like trying to ban out Doinby. Like these players have such unique and deep champion pools that it's better off to try and target someone who is a little bit more predictable in what they are going to and what they like to play. Kennen I've got here because I think Kennen makes a lot of sense for Xiaohu. AP scaling. Typically, teams are playing a lot of Twisted Fate, so they don't have that much AP damage in their damage profile. So picking Kennen, which seems to have reliable CC, it has great team fighting capability, and it has a lot of AP damage on the builds that everyone is using on him, makes a lot of sense. And I think Xiaohu on a champion like Kennen can really, really dominate. Jace, I think, is, if it's available, Xiaohu will probably look to it. Jace is very, very comfortable in the 1v1. Obviously, Jace is always looking to win that 1v1. And there's very few champions in the game at the moment that do consistently beat Jace in the 1v1, assuming, everyone's playing correctly, which you would expect of someone of Xiaohu's capability. Um, this also makes a lot of sense because Zhao Hu in a 1v1 can really, really get huge leads against his opponent. And I think that's something that RNG will want to do for Zhao Hu that they can eventually can leverage towards Gala. I've got here Gragas because he is someone who likes playing Gragas in typically matchups where the other top laner is looking to either get a lot of 1v1 dominance, get a lot of gold, or try and try and dominate lane in the top lane to be able to snowball the game. And Gragas is like his neutralizing pick that he picks a lot in that. We saw that a lot at MSI, for example, against Khan, for example. And I think this is just my personal opinion. I have no evidence or facts on this. It's just from what I know of the players. Noguri is not a Gragas player. Zhao Hu is, and something tells me that FPX scrimmed RNG and Zhao Hu played Gragas top, and that's why then Noguri tried to use it in that game. I believe it was against Damwon. But because it's definitely not a Noguri pick, and that's what makes me think that potentially someone is playing it in that top lane to make FPX select it, because it's definitely not an FPX pick. So that makes me think that it's probably Zhao Hu is the one that picking that Gragas in scrims. Next we move on to jungle. Both junglers have a very similar champion pool. Again, given the meta at the moment in jungle, expect to see a lot of Lee Sin, expect to see Xin Zhao, and expect to see Olaf. These 80 junglers that build Gore Drinker, that can skirmish, that can contest for things like scuttle, vision control, get to really be able to influence team fights if they get to the objective first. So I do expect Wei to be picking a lot of these champions and using these pick potentials to get Zhao Hu ahead, because that is obviously how RNG likes to play. Cryan has come under a little bit of criticism of late, especially because of his champion pool. He looks like a very different different player when he's on Twisted Fate versus when he's not on Twisted Fate. So, a bit of a meme, but obviously Twisted Fate is going to be his number one priority there. I do expect EDG to just ban it and say, well, what else have you got? Because EDG will see the Scout Cryan matchup as very favorable for EDG. So if they take away that comfort of Twisted Fate, that ability to be able to, Destiny into top, give Zhao Hu a lead and let Zhao Hu then carry. Taking away that from RNG, taking away that from Cryan, I think is a really, really viable strategy that EDG should probably implement. With that in mind, though, obviously Cryan, we see a very utility-based gameplay, and so that's why I think if he does get his Twisted Fate banned, he'll just move to a Rise. Rise can do a similar thing, not as reliable and not as strong earlier on as the Twisted Fate, but again, you're looking for that Realm Warp, and in RNG's case, you're looking for that Realm Warp top and to get Zhao Hu ahead. So I do expect Twisted Fate and Rise to be priority for Cryan. I've got there Syndra. Syndra is just a comfort pick for Cryan. I think if he gets really challenged in his champion pool, he'll just look to a Syndra because I think that's quite comfortable for him. And also, I can see him picking Syndra just because Zhao Hu playing Syndra top will help Cryan be able to sneak and draft a little bit more, because you do obviously have to respect the fact that Syndra could be going top. So that's the other reason why I've got Syndra there, because I think that's a way that they can sort of protect Cryan a bit more in draft. Gala, super important. I expect to see him play Ziggs though, because I think EDG will want to try and target him and get Viper ahead. So I expect, Misfortune and Ziggs, two champions that can, play pretty safe, all things considered. Gala is one of the few Ziggs players in the world, bot lane Ziggs, that, is someone who hard carries on it. It doesn't seem like it's just a safe AFK farming champion when it's on Gala. So this is obviously something I do expect Gala to pick. Misfortune, obviously, we know how strong she is, sorry. And, of course, Aphelios, again, very, very strong in the meta right now, and something that I think is going to be contested in draft because you probably don't want Viper to get it if it's available. Ming, like many LPL supports, loves hard engage. Absolutely loves champions like Leona, Nautilus, Brom, Thresh, Rel. You expect to see these sort of champions. I do expect Leona to be his main priority because I think Leona is the strongest out of the ones I mentioned. But then we'll probably look towards Nautilus because I think Nautilus is a massive comfort for Ming. Also, Brom obviously makes a lot of sense given the champions that, Gala is playing, like Misfortune, for example, Aphelios. So yeah, I expect to see a lot of that. But if these get banned or get taken away, then look for things like a Thresh or a Rel. EDG is kind of the opposite to RNG. They use mid lane to they try and get mid lane ahead, and then from there mid lane then transitions that gold, and that leverages advantages towards bottom lane. Flandre will be playing a lot of weak side. His job, I think, EDG will be telling Flandre, just go even or lose lane gracefully against Xiaohu. Don't get blown up by him because that takes away a lot of RNG strength. So that's why I expect to see Gwen, for example, Graves, Renekton, champions that have a lot of sustain, can play very safe by themselves, have potentials of outplaying the ganks. And it just allows Flandre just to very simply go about his business, not lose lane heavily, and then obviously have tools in his champion's kit to be able to influence team fights later on. Most importantly, keep the VIP Viper safe. So Renekton, while it's not the biggest meta pick at the moment, I can expect him to go on Renekton, survive lane, do well, get his Gore Drinker, get Sterex, and then basically just protect Viper. That's kind of what I expect Flandre's job to be in this series, is don't let Xiaohu get too big, and then protect Viper in team fights. JJ, same sort of very, very similar champion pool to Wei. Expect to see a lot of Lee Sin, Xin Zhao. I think JJ probably prefers the Viego to the Olaf, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, certainly Olaf is on there as well. So a lot of very similar champions. I do see, again, a lot of these Gore Drinker champions that, skirmish, contest vision, this is the strongest jungle. This seems to be the strongest junglers in the meta at the moment, as junglers particularly don't really like to play the assassins outside of Ona and Canyon. So that's why we see a lot of Lee Sin, Jin Zhao, Viego, Olaf, these sort of champions. And JJ, he is considered to be a weak link of EDG and something that, teams can target. However, I don't think Wei is that player. And I don't think RNG is that team that plays for jungle enough to punish JJ. And JJ can, go about his business, get scout ahead, and then look then to help bot lane. And cover in the counter ganks, obviously, to protect Flandre should he need it. Massive important matchup for EDG in this game is, of course, the mid lane, and Scout, I think, has to have a big game if EDG is going to beat RNG. Scout, we know the quality of the player he is, very, very talented player. I expect to see picks that challenge Cryan and really look to punish Cryan's kind of predictable champion pool. I expect Twisted Fate to get banned, and then we'll probably see a lot of Rise in Syndra. In that case, then I expect to see Syndra contested. Scout also very comfortable in the champion, so I expect to see that. And if you've seen any highlights of Scouts LeBlanc or Scouts Silas, you know that's why I've got them there. He is such great players on those champions, and those are champions that he can take over the game with, which I think is really important because the game could come down to whether or not Scout can blow up Gala or Xiaohu. And, that's why you want him on champion like LeBlanc, like Silas, even Syndra, for example, champions that can, do that damage, that can take over the game, that can win you the game in a team fight. Scout, very, very important for this series. And I don't want to see him on things like Twisted Fate. I don't want to see him on things that are utility. I want Scout to, put the team on the back. Don't just rely on Viper. I want to see Scout show the world why he is such an amazing player, why he is one of the best in the world. Because for EDG, I don't think Viper alone is enough to win this game. Of course, though, Viper, if you are going to count on one ADC in the world to hard carry you in a best of 5 series, it would be Viper. Viper is the best ADC on the planet for a reason. His champion pool is pretty favorable in this meta right now, with the exception, of course, Kai'Sa. I do have Kai'Sa there just because I think Viper will pick it anyway, because what weakness the champion has in the meta right now kind of doesn't really impact Viper as much, because he's such a great Kai'Sa player that he can overcome those the nerfs that came through on Kai'Sa. And he and I think it's very strong as well, because if he can get on the back line and take out Gala or take out Xiaohu, RNG could become a little bit lost in the team fight. So coming in, sweeping through, taking out key targets, and then can really then allow Scout then to put out that damage, especially if Scout is on these LeBlancs and these Silases, champions that put out a lot of damage. Misfortune's there purely because of how powerful Misfortune is in the meta right now. Viper is someone who has shown he is willing to play it, and he's a pretty good Misfortune player, all things considered. But I don't know, maybe it's just me. Seeing Gala and Viper on Misfortune would make me a little bit sad. I want to see them on hard carry 1v9 sort of champions. I want to see Aphelios, I want to see Kai'Sa, I want to see these champions that can really show how talented these two players are in the bot lane. Because these are the two of the best, if not the two best ADCs we have in the tournament. And to see them, on Misfortune would be a little bit sad, I think. I've got Aphelios there because I'd be very surprised if Viper gets Aphelios. I think if Aphelios is open, I would not be surprised if EDG just first pick it. They just first pick it blind. If they're on red side, just insta-lock Aphelios Thresh. I would be very, very surprised if they pass up on Aphelios when they can. Viper, you've probably seen the highlight to death of him against FPX, where he just 1v4s that team fight, and everyone got flashbacks of 200 years. Miko, very much like Ming in the sense of loves hard engage supports. I think Thresh, though, is a lot stronger on Miko than it is on Ming, just because of the nature of, I think Aphelios is stronger on Viper than it is on Gala. So I expect if Viper is getting that Aphelios, for them to really try and make sure Miko gets on Thresh, because Aphelios Thresh is the strongest duo for Aphelios. Leona, Nautilus, Braum, Rel, again, I think these are the champions that we're just going to see. I don't expect to see any Enchanter supports. If you're someone who likes Enchanter supports, like if you're someone who likes Nami, someone likes Yana, this is not the game for you, because Ming and Miko, they're definitely two players that really like hard engaged supports. And that I think is very typical of LPL and LCK supports, probably the exception of maybe Carrier. I think most of them generally prefer these sort of tanky champions that can lock down a key target to then influence a team fight. Key matchups, I think, firstly, we have to talk about top lane. I think top lane, to me, is super important. Xiaohu needs to have a big day and really get ahead and punish Flandre being on weak side and force EDG to have to put resources into Flandre. Because I think if that happens and you're taking away resources from Scout and Viper, that's when RNG can then really pounce on those other lanes. If Flandre is going pretty much even, or if he's only slightly behind, but he's pretty much self-sufficient, especially on champions like Gwen and Graves, that don't need that much gold. They basically just need their mythic, and then they're pretty much good to go. Then EDG become much more heavily favored, because then JJ and Miko are making sure that Viper and Scout are getting the resources they need to become those big hyper carries later on in the game. Mid is also super important for the opposite reason, because I think if Cryan gets his hands on Twisted Fate, I think it's a very different story, but I don't expect him to do that. So with that in mind, I think Cryan, if he goes even, or if he is slightly down on gold but not overly too drastically, and is pretty much self-sufficient, I think RNG then are able to put more resources into Xiaohu and Gala, which in turn then they can win games late. But if they're having to influence a lot of resources away from Xiaohu early on to make sure that Cryan's not getting blown up in lane, then that becomes a massive problem, because then that means then, Flandre has free reign to scale up, Viper has free reign to scale up, and I think this can really, really influence and impact the way these games are. So I think these two matchups are very important, depending on how Flandre and how Cryan are able to overcome these superstars that they are going to be facing in lane. With all that in mind, I do expect EDG to win this series. I think EDG just play the game a little bit cleaner, and I think the meta suits them and their game style a little bit better than it does RNG, just because I think RNG has to resort a bit more on Xiaohu playing these crazy champions, and while they do work out a lot of the time, that has been against lesser competition. And I think EDG is a very well-disciplined team, and I don't think that's going to work against them. However, I do expect it to be a very tough series and very closely contested, and I expect it to go to distance, so I'm giving this to EDG 3-2. But that's it for me today. Let me know what you think. Did you enjoy that? Do you agree? Do you think RNG is going to win? Or do you think EDG is going to be able to take down RNG? But always stay safe, be kind to one another, and I'll see you next time.